All right. Well, today, Dave Jordan and I are sitting down for our first ever podcast conversation to talk about our upcoming search for Amelia and her plane out in the South Pacific with the Nauticos team. So, Dave, good morning. How are you feeling today?
Good morning. It's a great morning here in Maine, and it's not as good as being out at sea, but it's pretty good.
Yeah. When you're nice and cozy at home, you wish you were out at sea, and then it's probably vice versa, right?
Yeah, that's true. It is true because when you're at sea, you have a whole different circumstance. You're surrounded by beautiful views with really nothing to see, and it's you have this whole uh, group of tasks to do that you don't have to do at home. Uh, but you want to go home. But when you get home, you kind of wish you were back out there and with that really unique setting again. Uh, but it's good to be home too.
I totally relate to that. I think that's what adventure is all about, right? Going away so you can miss both sides, and then you have that yearning for it because of the varied ways that we spend our time. And Dave, you got this really beautiful and interesting backstory connected to the search for Amelia Earhart. And so, for our listeners and our viewers here who are just starting to get to know us, I want you to kind of take us back to the beginning. You've been out 3 separate times to search for Amelia Earhart with this really well-formed and highly knowledgeable team. So why don't we start there with the backstory?
Well, the backstory goes way back to when we first met Elgin Long. I think it was in 1997. We, as a company, had just kind of emerged from doing many years of working with the Navy and submarine programs, secret stuff. And in 1995, the Cold War having ended, we were invited to work on a commercial project looking for a World War II shipwreck, which is a whole nother story. But we were very successful. We found this ship. It was 17,000 feet deep. And we were on Dan Rather, CBS News, and all the newspapers, and it was very exciting. And it was really a springboard towards looking for other projects like that. And we did do several other very successful deep sea commercial projects. So when Nova, WGBH in Boston, was looking to do a documentary about Elgin Long and his quest to find Amelia Earhart, they came to us to ask our opinion. What do you think of this? Is his theory? Uh, is it valid? What do you think? So Elgin came and he explained to us, gave us a presentation, and told us what he thought about her disappearance. Now, up to that point, we hadn't really thought much about Amelia Earhart, except we had been contacted by some folks who thought she was on an island, and we looked at that and said that doesn't make any sense to us at all, and we declined to participate. So when Elgin came and he described his theory, it made perfect sense to us. And after studying it a bit, we said, not only do we believe this is a valid theory of her disappearance, but we think we can find her. And that kind of inspired us to begin the search. So that was back in, I think it was 1997 or 98. We found some other shipwrecks in 1999, and we were really excited about jumping into this. So that's kind of where it all started for us.
So it was this connection and this opportunity to start this search for Amelia with Elgin that kicked it all off. And now I would say Amelia Earhart's probably a part of your everyday life, or at least her legacy, right? Now that you've been involved so many times. Take us back to some of your first searches. When you find your target, when you find what you're looking for, what's that specific moment like?
I have described the moment of discovery to a couple of different people. I remember one of them that was very moving. We were looking for the one of the U.S. or one of the Japanese carriers sunk at the Battle of Midway, the Kaga, and we found wreckage of the Kaga, and it was where we thought it was, and we were very excited, and we're looking at these images of destruction on the seafloor, twisted metal. There were shoes from the Japanese sailors that were lost there, laying on the seafloor. and we watched this for hours. And then I remember in the morning, I was sitting on the side of the deck looking at the sunrise, and one of my shipmates had brought a little flask of vodka along, even though it was a dry ship and alcohol was not allowed. She said, we need to toast our discovery. So we sat there and we sipped this little bit of vodka and we're looking at the sunrise. And I was just imagining it was so peaceful and calm. And I was imagining the destruction and the violence and the explosions that were happening on that very spot all those years before. So it was a very dramatic moment. The other thing that I think about moments of discovery are they're fleeting. You find something and that moment comes and goes in a flash. Now you have discovered it. Before that, you hadn't. So it's important to think about the process,
Mm-hmm.
the work, all the work and the study and the excitement that leads up to that event. So you wish for that event, that discovery, but afterwards you wished you had paid more attention to the process.
Oh, Dave, I so relate to that. It shifts the timeline, right? It shifts the goal because the original goal is to find what you're looking for. The next step, it sort of changes the project entirely. I felt that way at different points of planning my flight around the world, right? These big searches and expeditions that we go on that take years of planning, they're so complex, and there are different hinges where when one thing takes place, then we shift, right? We have a heading change. So we have so much in common because of our shared love for research and adventure and all this connected through Amelia. And because this is our first conversation, we're going to bounce around and talk about a lot of different topics, but to focus on
Can I interrupt you and add to that a little bit?
absolutely. Go for it.
Because we're probably going to interrupt each other a lot, but we
Yes.
shouldn't. Uh, um, Part of that story about the Midway discovery is the inspiration, because other people, maybe they weren't inspired necessarily by us, but the fact that we did find bits of that wreck. Other people went on and found more, and they've mapped other ships and all that. We've been able to participate. But I think the discovery can be an inspirational moment. And you may have sensed this when you did your flight, and then that inspired you to go on and have a very successful career as you have. And I think finding Amelia's plane will be a great inspiration to many people, knowing that such a mystery can be solved. And then what we'll find. I mean, that's a whole nother topic of what will we find when we locate this plane, which has been an amazing thing to speculate about over the years.
Yeah, and we maybe should speculate a little bit about that, because I know our viewers are really going to be excited about this. What if? So say we go out in it's 2025 now. We're announcing that we're in the planning stages to take this new information and data back out to the South Pacific to go and look for Amelia's plane. I guess we should sort of start there, Dave. I don't want to skip too far ahead, but that's what we're planning. We know an area where we think she is. Take us out onto that ship. Once we're funded, once we've got support, the next search for Amelia. What are we doing day to day out on the ship with the technology and equipment as we start to begin that search?
The day-to-day activities out at sea, the search, is really changed over the years. It used to be that when we go out to sea, we were in a different world. We couldn't communicate very effectively with people back home because we were, miles at sea, and radios didn't go that far, and satellite communication was really expensive, so you minimized it. And you kind of found yourself in a little microcosm, a little bubble, and news of the world didn't matter so much. You knew when you got back a couple of months from now, it would pretty much be the same news that it was when you left.
Yeah.
And maybe there'd be sports events that you'd want to know about, but you really were in another world. The technology was different too. We used to tow equipment at the end of long cables miles below. We're talking about 18,000 feet deep in this area where we're searching. And if you can imagine having 4 or 5 miles of cable trailing behind you, towing something that's just a few meters or a few feet above the seafloor, it's tricky. And you had to be, go slow and steady, and you had to watch every minute. And you're seeing the feed from the bottom in real time. You're imaging areas of the seafloor that no human has ever seen before. And it was always, it never got boring to watch that. But you had to always be attentive because something could go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Things have changed. Now, when we go out to sea, we have internet. It still costs a bit, but it's not so expensive, and we can surf the web if we want to. Some ships have telepresence where scientists at home can be participating in real time. So you're not quite as disconnected from the world as you used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you physically are. If there's an medical emergency, for example, you find out that yes, you are far away from any help. But it's a little bit of a different mindset. Also, the technology has changed. We now use autonomous robots that we deploy, and they go off and they run a pattern on their own. And we don't even know, we know what they're doing, but we don't see what they're gathering until they come back. And so it's a whole different, so every day you get a new burst of information, and then you kind of sit around and wait in between. So it's different now.
What does the quality of the video that we're receiving after the autonomous vehicles come back up? What are we going to be looking at on the screens once we upload that new video?
It's a good question as to what we will see, because we're really not imaging the seafloor with video all the time. Light does not travel very far in the ocean. It being seawater, it doesn't transmit light very far at all. So you really can't see very far. You can't get a panorama like you can from dry land.
Mm-hmm.
We really rely on sonar. So we're imaging the seafloor with sound, and we're doing it in such a way that it appears to be a picture, and we see relief and we see reflections, and if the plane is there, we'll see its outline and shape. But it's not the same as a video image or a photographic image. So typically what we'll do is we'll image large swaths of the seafloor with sound, and when it comes back, if we see anything interesting, we'll send the robot back to take a series of video or photo images of a particular spot. Now, those cameras are very high resolution, so what we'll see is very high quality, but we still have the same problem with lighting. So having good lighting that doesn't have a lot of backscatter with all this stuff in the water, and getting a really good clear image is still a challenge. But we should be able to see, once we know a spot to image, we'll get a beautiful photographic image of everything on that spot.
So I hope this isn't a dumb question, but is there a light on the drone that would shine in an immediate area to provide more view once we send it back to a specific location if you want to investigate an area?
Yes, lighting is a key element, because there is absolutely at 18,000 feet, there is no light.
Okay, so it's only coming from the
Complete
drone.
blackness. Exactly. And if anyone that's been involved in photography knows that the lighting and the angle of the lighting is important, and we don't have the luxury of having lighting from any direction we want. It's on this small vehicle, so you can get a lot of backscatter if there's anything in the water, which there typically is, and it's tricky to get a good image. There are cases where you can deploy more than one vehicle if you really want. Like when we go back to the site after discovery, we'll bring all the tools to get the best imagery we can, both for visual purposes and for forensic purposes, so we can really study the details of the site as it exists.
Wow. So many details to take into account, the complexity of a challenge like this, and it's exciting. But I love how you, Dave, especially on our team meetings and as we now meet weekly, continuing our plan to start on this next search, we're taking one step at a time, right? Certain things must be accomplished before you can move on and get excited about the next. So why don't you tell everyone where we are in this process? In June of 2025, you all have been so kind to invite me to join as a principal of Nauticos, and I'm so excited to be a part of the storytelling and help everyone get to know this story. But from your perspective, tell us where we are now and why June is such a critical point in our timeline.
Well, we do appreciate having you on board. You add a new dimension to our team. Our team is generally engineers and folks who have made a study of the analysis of the project and know how to run an operation. And we know quite a bit about our craft, but the sharing of what we're doing and the ability to engage outside of our team is certainly a weakness that we needed to fill. And you obviously have that strength, and that's very valuable, as well as you're also a pilot, and that makes a big difference, technically, because we don't have any pilots on our team. And I think that your technical expertise, as well as the ability to run a project like you did, flying around the world, are all elements that will be super helpful to us as we go forward. Where we are, it kind of depends on how far you want to go back to say where we are now. The short version of the story is that we have been methodically scanning the seafloor. Here's how I'd like to say it. We think we know where Amelia and Fred's plane was shortly before they disappeared. They came very close. They came heartbreakingly close to the island. We know that Leo Bellarts, the chief radioman on the Coast Guard cutter Itasca, who was listening to her transmissions, he thought she was so close that he stepped out on deck to listen for the engine noise. And we have his testimony before he passed away recorded. The signal strengths of the radio signals that she was sending also prove that she was very, very close at that time. And we have some numbers on that now that we didn't have a few years ago. So we know where she was at that time. Trouble is, she flew around for the better part of an hour searching for the island, and she didn't tell us what she was doing. She told us a little bit. She said, "I'm flying north and south on 157337. Well, Amelia, are you going north or south right now? We don't know. So that's one example of assumptions that we have to make to figure out where she actually went in the water. There's also the complication of floating. Did the plane float for a long time? Probably not, but if it did, that would drift. So we have to take all those things into account. The bottom line is, with all those uncertainties, there's a very large area that she could have ended up in, her plane could have ended up in. And we are forced to make assumptions about that final flight path to narrow it down, which we've done. And we felt that we did a good job. With Elgin Long's help, we explored what we considered to be the most likely scenarios. Mm-hmm. And I think we've proved that didn't work out, that didn't happen that way. It's one of the less likely scenarios that we need to investigate. It's kind of like the old Sherlock Holmes mantra that, once you've eliminated everything that's likely, what's left, however unlikely, is the truth. Mm-hmm. So we are looking at some less likely scenarios now because we've methodically eliminated some of what we felt was most likely. Now, having said that, these are not, in retrospect, terribly unlikely. For example, did she fly straight into the island, or did she take another path? So, we're considering these alternatives now. And we have analyzed it. We have a map. We're ready to go search the next spot. And we believe that with the right equipment, we can finish the search now. We can search all the other places that are possible based on the data we have.
That's
So,
one thing I've always respected about watching the Nauticos team from afar, because having the name Amelia Earhart, I get sent every link, every article, every, hey, did you see this about Amelia? Because I really respect the scientific approach that Nauticos takes, right? You're very data driven and using the numbers and reconstructing Amelia's radios, for instance. I mean, let's talk about that. I just had a great conversation with Rod, who of course is a part of our team and highly involved in these, finding the radio parts to recreate Amelia's radio system, which you all went and did a test with. Give us the high level story around that and why this is such a critical component to our next search for Amelia.
we don't like to think about this problem as trying to figure out what happened. I like to say we're trying to figure out what could have happened. And that gives us a space of probabilities to work with. So having some technical and statistical data to work with really kind of gives you that sense of what the probabilities are, what was likely, where you could be. If you're focused on trying to guess what happened, you're only going to look in that spot. You need to be able to spread your thinking out to all the possibilities. So the radio signal analysis is really crucial because that's about the only primary data we have. Everything else is assumptions and speculations. You know, when she says I'm flying north and south on 157337, well, what did she mean? Was she going north or south at that time? Where was that line? Where does she think that line was? Simple things when she reported I'm 200 miles out. Well, was she 200 miles out at the time that she sent that report by her estimation? Or was it a calculation that Fred made 15 minutes earlier and she's just now reporting it? You know, we don't, there's so many uncertainties, things we don't know. What we do know with technical certainty is signal strengths, radio propagation, radio performance. These are all things that we can measure and things that we can calculate with uncertainties, of course, but we can characterize as uncertainties. So those are really the important elements of the radio analysis that Rod and his team have been doing. You know, one example is when she said the one time Amelia said she heard them is a really crucial moment because we can really, that's one time where we know that she was able to get a signal that told us that she was really close at that time.
Mm-hmm. What did it feel like when you conducted this radio test and you found, wow, we can really hone in on a specific area? Were you feeling reinvigorated to say, okay, we've got to go back? I mean, because it's 3 separate searches you've been on. You're heading back again. That's a lot of work, Dave, for any group of people, whether they're fully funded or not, right? This effort, what keeps drawing you back? Besides the data and the information, what is inside of you that loves this search so much?
You have to realize when we did that radio test, it was at the height of COVID back in 2020. It was really a logistical challenge just to get everybody together in a safe manner and conduct the operations. I remember when we were doing interviews, because we had Bill Mills, our videographer, with us. We would take our masks off for brief moments and would make sure we didn't talk at one another. But life was different back then, and the idea of going back out to search was probably not foremost in our minds at that point. We were just simply taking the next step. Yeah. You have to be methodical in this business. Things happen slowly. I can't tell you how many times when I've told them how many millions of dollars the search will take, how many times people said, well, that's not a lot of money. Well, it isn't, but it is to me. It
Yeah.
isn't to some people, and it is at the moment when you're trying to get that person to commit.
Mhm.
Um, and it's really in some ways, people look at it backwards, I think. They say, well, you've, quote, failed 3 times. What makes you think you're going to succeed on the 4th time? You're doing the same thing over and over again. Uh, well, we're not. We are methodically eliminating areas of the seafloor that could contain the plane.
Mhm.
Um, it's sort of like if you believe that you've lost your car keys and you know they're in the house somewhere and you've looked in the living room and the bedroom and the dining room, you don't say, well, I guess they're not in the house. No, you look in the bathroom, you look in the next place,
Mhm.
and you know that you're more likely to find them because you've already not found them in the other places. So that's kind of the way we look at this. Um, it is frustrating that we can't just go right back out and do the next thing, but that's just part of the challenge of it. Is it's a combination of technical, emotional, financial, business. It's really a wide-ranging project, and we just keep plugging away.
One of the things that I find so beautiful about your connection to Amelia's original journey and my flight around the world and your continued searches to go back out to the South Pacific is that back in the 1930s, leading up to 1937, when Amelia and Fred departed on this around the world flight, they were working on this for years to bring it to fruition, that slow process that you mentioned. I took probably 10 years of flight training and then 2 intense years of announcing, fundraising, planning for my flight around the world. There's got to be a certain personality type that's willing to take on these goals and delay that instant gratification and really put in the hard work and effort that goes into it. Why don't you brag on the Nauticos team a little bit here and tell us who's on board and the type of expertise we're bringing into this next search, so that when we're announcing to our potential sponsors and people who want to get involved, like, they're working with experts here. This is not a fresh group that's heading back out and going, we'll see what we find. Tell us who we've got on board.
It's a long tale of how we got here and who it is, but it is a team. There's there.
Yes.
I like to say I don't know how to do 10% of what we do, but I know how to find people that can do the best in their fields. And we have gathered a team, first of all, from our Nauticos days. So our days of focusing on deep sea projects, both with the military and with commercial shipwreck searches and other related development of technology. We've built equipment that can operate at 20,000 feet deep. And that team includes folks like Tom Detweiler, who was the operations manager for the Titanic discovery, and also working with us discovered the Israeli submarine, the Car, among many other projects. His expertise goes way back to the beginning days of ocean mining, when they were first learning how to deploy equipment down to these great depths for commercial purposes. And he also was the science officer on the Calypso with Cousteau. So, he has an amazing background and is a tremendous, been a tremendous member of our team. We've worked together for a couple of decades now. Jeff Morris is managing our project. Jeff was an underwater archaeologist and has expertise in sonar interpretation and operation. In fact, he gives classes to Navy folks and others on how to operate and interpret these side scan sonar devices that we call them. So they're an example of the Nauticos expertise that we bring. We have had up till now an unblemished record of success in finding the things that we've set out to find. In fact, I kind of regret this, but I remember telling our team at one point. We found everything that we set out to look for in the first try. We need to try a harder project. That's when we decided to go after Amelia Earhart's plane.
About what you asked for.
Yeah, it's a much harder. It's a very small target, a very large area to search, and very deep. So yes, I think we will succeed, but it's not been on the first try. Now, to supplement this team, we engaged folks like Rod Bloxham and Tom Vincent and their radio engineers, all stemming from Collins Radio, the people that put the radios on the Apollo spacecraft and many other accomplishments. Those folks, also being amateur radio enthusiasts, are incredibly knowledgeable in working with the primary data of the Amelia Earhart loss, that is the radio signals, and that's really, really important. They're also experts at navigation. My personal expertise goes back to underwater navigation. So that was what I focused on at the Applied Physics Lab in Maryland when I first got out of the Navy, being a former submariner, and later on in my career after founding Nauticos. I could mention many other names, but those are the folks that kind of come to mind as the primary ones heading up our team at this point. And then, of course, we have Amelia Rose Earhart joining our team, who I think is really going to complement and supplement what we're doing in many ways.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. And yeah, just bringing in that high level view of the sophistication of this team. There are dozens of people involved, and that's what part of this podcast will be about, is really interviewing those personalities that all contribute such a specific need and function on a big expedition like this, from planning to execution to all the different steps, and also just the camaraderie of it all. I mean, it's a very special thing to go out on an adventure, whether you're at sea or on land, wherever it may be. There's a bond that I'm sure is formed in these really special situations that I can't wait to be a part of. I know I experienced it on my flight around the world, but I just can't wait to get to know everyone better.
Another element of it that I didn't mention,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't contribute necessarily to the search, but it does speak to what you were just talking about, the camaraderie and the outreach, is we always try to include a teacher or student with us on our expeditions, so that we have a way to do some public outreach and some STEM work to try to get a chance to inspire students. Rod and Tom are particularly supportive in that regard. And one of the cool things we did combined the educational outreach, the radio signal work, and the fact that we're out on an expedition in the middle of practically nowhere, 1,600 miles from Honolulu. We were able to, building equipment from parts we scrounged on the ship, they built an antenna, and we connected with the folks at NASA. In fact, one of our teachers that we associate with works with NASA, and turns out there were ham radio enthusiasts on board the space shuttle, and we were able to connect with them while they flew over us. Literally pointing an antenna at the spacecraft as it flew overhead, and for a few minutes connecting through the amateur radio equipment and being able to say hello to the astronauts as they were flying over. And it was remarkable to us that at those moments, they were the closest humans to us, because they were just a couple hundred miles away, and we were hundreds of miles from any other populated area. So maybe close to 1,000 miles if you consider Tarawa. So that was interesting. We also used the radio equipment to connect to students back home, and they had ran a little student interaction with them at that time. So we do try to engage both academically and with students and with the public back home the best we can while we're out there, and to share that experience and that camaraderie.
Yeah, those aspects are so important. I remember being a kid and having a speaker come in or a special project like this where your brain just starts to see the world through a new perspective. And that could be where a passion for an entire career launches from, is that one story that you find the child at the right age. So I will, of course, be a big part of that as well. I can't wait to go do school visits and talk to the kids, directly about why we're doing this and why it's worth taking on really difficult projects like this. That sense of understanding the scientific process and testing out theories and not looking for that easy answer. When I think about the rest of the world right now, there's a lot of AI. There's a lot of easy, quick gratification because of everything available on the internet. This is the question of where is Amelia Earhart is one of the few things that Google cannot tell you the answer to, which I love that, because our specific team is uniquely designed to not only go and search for her, but also really connect and create meaning to this story. I mean, I'm not related to Amelia Earhart. Turns out I thought I was for a long time, not related, but I relate to her because she was pushing the envelope of her own life. And so even though none of us ever got to meet Amelia, I think we have a lot in common because of the way we relate to how we go through the world. With all that in mind, Dave, what do you think the public will get out of this search? Whether they're engaged with us on social media or maybe just seeing little clips on the news?
I think the public has a dim idea of what the oceans are all about.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I've heard comments about, well, haven't we mapped the whole ocean yet? Well, no. if you're talking about mapping it to the ability to even find something as big as a ship, it's only a few percent, maybe 10%, and that's mostly near shore. The idea that you have to go down into the ocean to be able to measure anything down there is probably not really well appreciated. But even more importantly, the effect that the oceans have on our climate and on our food supply, our source of oxygen, I think maybe that's beginning to be a little bit recognized, but I doubt that most people really appreciate that. So, I hope we'll be able to share a little bit of that along the way. There's always the excitement of solving a mystery that gets people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's almost, that is our goal in a way, but our real goal is to use that to raise awareness of the ocean and its importance. So I hope that the public will get at least a better glimmer of the vital role our oceans play. And we really don't put a lot of money or effort into learning more about the ocean. We love space because it's exciting and there's rockets and you can see forever, but the oceans are not that, not that compelling, but they're in many ways more important.
Oh gosh, not any less compelling, just more mysterious, right? There's the ocean. I haven't told you this yet, Dave, but I'm actually really afraid of the ocean. I would rather be up there, and I feel very in control in an airplane. There's something so mysterious and dark and unknown down there. How did you get comfortable with being an ocean person? Was it your days back in the Navy that got you and your excitement and intrigue with all this going?
I really can't explain the feeling of being comfortable in the ocean. I don't consider myself to be a master mariner. I was a submariner, and sailing a submarine around and sailing a sailboat around are two entirely different skills. And you don't need to know certain things to do one, but you must know certain things to do the other. And so my initial experience of spending significant times in the ocean was in submarines, which is a very unusual place to be.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I really enjoyed the idea that we were down there and we could sense what was around us through our sonars. You couldn't really see anything, but you had ways of sensing, and that sort of, I think, became very interesting to me, and it made it a quick transition to doing it with robots and doing it as a business, as a profession. Um, Again, the I have a lot of respect for the ocean. I, in some ways, share your fear because it can be a dangerous place. I don't want to overstate that. If you operate carefully and thoughtfully and you have experience, you'll be fine, usually. But like anything else, things can happen. But it's uh, it's a different environment to be in, and I'm sure that you sense the same thing as a pilot. I've never been a pilot. I've ridden in planes before, and I've always enjoyed that too. But getting off the earth, whether it's up or down, is fun.
That's very well said. I like that. Yeah, and that's tackling it with information, right? Knowledge and understanding and research and exposure to these types of things gets us more comfortable. I'm excited to be a part of this and be out there because I've never spent time on the water. I've never been on a cruise. I've certainly been on boats, but this will be multiple weeks out at sea. And just so everyone listening knows, it's not like we're going to be parked on the beach of Howland Island with our, sunscreen and our umbrellas. We are not allowed to step foot on Howland Island, the
No.
island atoll where Amelia and Fred were attempting to find in 1937 because it's a preserved area that's U.S. territory, right? Fish and Wildlife Reserve, or is it preserve or reserve?
A preserve, I believe, would be the right term. Fish and Wildlife Preserve. Yeah.
So we'll be on the ship nearby. How far from Howland? Well, actually, maybe not share that information specifically, but what's the general radius away from Howland we will be when we're on the boat?
We won't even be in view of Howland most of the time. And of course, we don't have to be exactly where our robots are. We just have to be near enough to collect them when they come back up. So we'll be in the old days when we were towing things, we had to be right where we had to be. But in the last couple of expeditions, we've had, well, the last expedition we had the flexibility to drive around a little bit. So we did go close enough to see the island. I mean, you have to be really close. Even from the air, we don't think it could be seen by much more than 15 miles away. But from the ocean surface, you have to be just a few miles away to be able to see it. We sent a drone up to get a view, so we could at least have a view of it. And we could see it from the ship at one point. But you're not allowed to go very close. You have to be a certain number of miles away by Fish and Wildlife rules because they don't want any chance of you contaminating the island anymore. I mean, they contaminated it plenty back in the 30s, but we're trying to avoid that now. In fact, they have, if you do go, and they do have expeditions that go onto the island to do scientific investigations, and I think even radio folks have gone on to do a broadcast. But you have to go through very specific protocols with Fish and Wildlife, including having a complete change of clothing that you switch to and put your other clothes in a plastic bag, and your equipment has to be frozen for a long time before you can step onto the island to try to protect it from any kind of contamination.
Wow.
So we won't be doing that.
This tiny little speck of land out in the middle of the South Pacific. I mean, if we imagine Howland Island right now in this exact moment, it's just out there chilling. No one around, minding its own business, and we're going to head back out there close to the island. The top elevation, the reason you can't see it from far away, it's just a couple feet above sea level. So it's a very mysterious place. It's got this allure to it for me. When I flew overhead, at 27,000 feet was our cruising altitude in the Pilatus PC-12. We were not allowed to descend even 1 foot below 27,000 feet, because in aviation, altitude is your friend, right? If you have an engine failure, especially on a single engine plane like ours, you want as much of a glide path as you can create from as high as possible. And because there's no runway, no one lives on Howland, they said, no, you stay at 27,000 and you circle overhead. And that view of seeing what Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan wanted to see with every fiber of their being, they wanted to spot Howland Island, their ultimate desire in that moment to save their own lives. And 77 years later, I'm circling overhead in the Pilatus, looking out the window, seeing what Amelia and Fred wanted to see. It was a magical and very somber moment at the same time, if that makes sense. And so that part of the world, I think, for myself as well as for the Nauticos team, it's one of those special places on the planet that will always be connected to because of Amelia's story from years past. Do you feel that too?
Well, I always appreciate the fact that we get to see things that very few humans ever got to see, including things on the seafloor that no human has ever seen before. So that is special. I was very disappointed in our first couple of expeditions that we really didn't get to see the island, because we were actually searching quite a distance away, many dozens of miles, and it cost time and money to go cruise around, and we were, like I said, towing, so we couldn't just leave the area. And we talked about making an excursion to go look at the island, but it was going to cost a lot of money to do that, and we were there for a job, and we needed to finish the job, so we never saw Howland Island until the third expedition.
Mm-hmm.
But that was kind of special when we did get a chance. And the obelisk, the Amelia Earhart obelisk, is still there, so you can see that from a little bit farther away.
Yeah, and what that obelisk is, basically, I've also heard it described as like a lighthouse. It's not technically a lighthouse, but it's sort of got that shape. Basically, it just looks like a pile of rocks now, with all it's been beaten down through the years. But that was put up as a monument to Amelia and Fred, and that's pretty much the only thing that's standing out there. We'll call it standing.
Yes.
So, real simple question. When I start telling my friends and family about this search, one of the questions that comes up a lot is, well, who does Amelia's plane belong to? If we find her, or find the plane, I should say, I want to be clear that we're not going to find Amelia Earhart or any sort of human remains at this, all these years later and at those depths. But when we locate the plane, who does this historic artifact belong to?
The ownership of Amelia's plane has been an area of great study and speculation. The simple matter is it won't be resolved until it's found. That's a simple answer. The plane was owned by Amelia herself, and I'm not a lawyer, so I may not state this perfectly correctly. I have briefs written for us about it. But it was owned by Amelia herself. Purdue helped her acquire it, but they didn't own it. And in her will, it wasn't really specifically mentioned, but the large items like her car went to her sister Muriel. But the plane was lost, so it wasn't part of her estate. When something is lost at sea, that's not a warship. Warships are different. They are considered sovereign property of the nation that launched them forever, no matter whether they're sunk or not. But if it's a non-military artifact, ship, aircraft, it's considered by the law of the sea in the stream of commerce. In other words, it was doing something for commerce, whether it was carrying cargo or passengers or whatever. And a salver is allowed or even encouraged to rescue a ship in distress or any kind of a ship or plane and restore it to the stream of commerce. So the Titanic is an example, a famous example. The Titanic sunk. It was a passenger ship. It was in the stream of commerce. And it was found by a team of American and French explorers, the American team led by Bob Ballard. And he declared, I won't put words in his mouth, but essentially declared it should be not touched. But a fellow named George Tulloch formed a company called RMS Titanic, and he went with a French team, and they they recovered some artifacts. They went to court, and they were declared salvors in the courts. And as long as they continued to salvage the ship and restore it to the stream of commerce, the courts let them continue to do that. And they still, to this day, I believe, are the salvors of the Titanic. They didn't find it. They weren't the discoverers, but they are the salvors because of their actions they're taking. That's an example. How it works out with any specific artifact, like Amelia's plane, depends on how the court judges its status, whether it was abandoned or, in one way or the other, the salvors get some kind of recognition for their efforts. So we're not too worried about that. Everyone that has any association with the plane, be it the Putnams or the Earhart family, have declared that it should be in a museum somewhere someday. So, which is what we would like to see as well. So I think we're all essentially on the same page. I don't anticipate that it will be completely at odds on this on this topic.
I imagine with the family and those who want it to go to a museum, that could be the case. With the public, I imagine there will be lots of opinions with just folks chiming in. And that's sort of a new element of this next search that we're going on to find the plane, is that we want to involve social media and really have this real-time informative approach. At least I'm really hoping to inject that into the search, because it is a step-by-step process. I think some people might find that they don't like that we don't have the simple answer yet, but I want to ask the public to come along with us to learn about the process of discovery and the effort and the step-by-step setbacks, the leap forward, all the different elements that can happen along the way. So I would be drawn to this type of content to know that it's not a movie trailer, right? We found Amelia. You're going to get it all wrapped up in a nice little hour. This is an open-ended search that we're embarking upon to tell the story. And I think the value of that is really fun. In our last couple of minutes here, Dave, as we start to wrap up our very first conversation on our podcast here, when you think about the types of sponsors and fundraisers who might be interested in supporting a mission like this, who comes to mind, and maybe what values do they have as an organization that might also align with ours?
You never know who is going to raise their hand and say, I'd like to help. And typically in our past efforts, we have targeted a number of individuals because we thought, well, they have an aviation connection, they seem to have the means, maybe they'll be interested because they might have a passion like we do. And it's impossible to predict whether any of that will come to pass. And I'm not going to name names, but I have spoken with many prominent individuals that fit that profile, and haven't really had much luck in getting them to back it. Mm-hmm. One of the things I like to refer to is what I call the yacht club syndrome. And that is, what are the people at the yacht club going to say about me backing this crazy project? Because some people do care, about that. They don't want to be associated with something that seems just crazy. And we're not crazy. We like to be able to show that we're serious and we have credentials, but you got to get somebody to sit down and listen to that. And then they have to imagine how they're going to explain that to the people at the yacht club. So I think that has been a little bit of a barrier. Um, we fortunately in 2017 connected with Alan Eustace. His name I will name because he's been super helpful, because he really understood. He was an engineer, he was a pilot, he had the means, and we had worked together on another project, and he, asked me. He kept asking me about this, and finally one day he said, "I'd like to help." Really didn't expect it because uh, I just didn't want to prevail on our friendship, I guess. But he volunteered, and off we went. Um, and So you never know what is going to be the right answer. Who's going to step up and say, "I'd like to help"? Um, I've talked with people that are totally unconnected with aviation, and sometimes they're helpful. Uh, we've had folks that have provided large amounts and small amounts, and most of them have some interest in aviation, but not always.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody knows Amelia Earhart, so uh, it it's just really hard to know what opportunity is going to come along. You just have to be ready for it. I like to say there are three elements to being lucky. First of all, you have to put yourself in a position to be lucky.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do the homework. You have to be qualified to be lucky. The second is you have to recognize that something lucky happened to you. That you got that call. I know one sponsor we got. My wife took the call, and she was about to tell me, this is another crank call that you're getting, because I get plenty of them. And I took it seriously, and it turned out to be a very helpful person.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing is when you've prepared yourself to be lucky and something lucky happens, you have to do something about it.
Yes.
You can't just sit there and let it pass you. You have to take action. So that's my recipe for being lucky.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And I definitely agree on all counts, because if you get lucky with something like this, you better be prepared to back it up, because the consequences and the stakes are so high. There's a beauty of that. And I think that the people who might want to get involved for the funding side, right, they're going to support adventure and the journey and the search, right? There's these sort of higher level concepts that a search like this stands for. Because look, is there any functional reason that we need to find Amelia's plane? No. But this is one of the world's greatest mysteries, and the information and what we will learn about this mysterious clouded moment in American history and world history. There's so much value in that, because it sparks curiosity, and that's where the educational component really gets me going as well. And gosh, when I was pitching and saying, "Hey, I want to fly around the world, and I want to borrow your $4.5 million airplane, and I want to create custom luggage just like Amelia did, and create all these components," at first, people looked at me with this look of, "Who are you? Where did you come from? And why are you so excited?" Right?
Right.
But when you share that enthusiasm, and there's a word I keep using for the Nauticos team and how we're all engaging in this, is that there's a real earnestness to why we're doing this. It feels good natured. It feels like a genuine search with people who take it so seriously, that I think the right connections and sponsors and supporters will come along that also align with that. Because like we said, we wanted to be real transparent about this process. We don't want to be secretive this time around. We want to say, here's the search we're going on, and there's going to be blunders and issues along the way. But if we tackle them and share that process, that's where the value lies, in those who choose to follow us along, whether they're just viewing the content or they're putting in millions of dollars.
And we have an advantage, Amelia, that you didn't have when you did your round the world flight. We can take them with us if they want to help. You can come along. So we
better be careful with that offer.
well, I mean, you know, not not for a little bit, but if you want to be a significant supporter, we would love to have you with us. And
Yeah,
Alan sailed with us, and I think he enjoyed his time very much.
yeah, absolutely. Very few people would have that opportunity to be out in such a special place. So I think it's really cool. Well, Dave, as we wrap up our first conversation, I wanted to brag on you a bit. For folks who are watching, if you want to check out Dave's books, you've written 5 books now, right?
Yep.
5 books, but the one that I've got all marked and tabbed up here with all of your stories, The Deep Sea Quest for Amelia Earhart by David W. Jordan. Tell people where they can grab a copy online.
Well, you can go to my website, nauticos.com, nauticos.com, and the book and other books will be there to look at. So
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dave. And I can't wait for our continued conversation.
thank you, Amelia. This has been fun.
All right. Blue skies.